Welcome to the Drive-By Entrepreneur Podcast, which exists to bring current and compelling content to entrepreneurs and influencers of small to mid-sized organizations. I'm John Frank, fellow entrepreneur and the owner of Third Road Management. And with this podcast, we will connect with a variety of experienced and dynamic individuals to shed some light on both the art and science of entrepreneurship. Before we begin, I'd like to thank our sponsors. First, my very own Third Road Management, a company that brings fractional CFO services to small and mid-sized organizations by revolutionizing the CFO suite. We'd also like to thank Two Hound Red, a brewery and restaurant located in Glen Ellen, Illinois, that is focused on creating classic, innovative beer and food. And finally, we'd like to thank NWC Media, which provides inbound marketing technology, project workflow management, and efficiency consulting to organizations of varied sizes, who is also the producer of the Drive-By Entrepreneur Podcast. Michael Valente.
John.
Welcome to the Drive-By Entrepreneur Podcast. Awesome to have you here. Really excited to dive in.
Thanks for having me.
And I think everybody's going to really enjoy what you have to say. It's been great to get to know you fairly recently, and I think it's going to be an engaging conversation, and I think people are going to take some great things away. Which reminds me, I do this at the beginning of every podcast, just explaining sort of the mission of the podcast, who it's for. But the Drive-By Entrepreneur Podcast exists to bring current and compelling content to entrepreneurs and influencers of small to mid-sized organizations, right? So you're an entrepreneur, I'm an entrepreneur. We intersect with all kinds of really wise people, whether they be bankers or attorneys or insurance people or other entrepreneurs. And just like the idea of sharing ideas with one another, I've always found to be very compelling. And so anyway, that's the idea. That's why we're here.
Well, I love it. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
You bet. All right. So you are the founder and CEO of Renovation Sells.
Correct.
So we're going to dive deep into Renovation Sells, but why don't you kick us off on sort of tell me your story. You know what I mean? Like, how did you get here? You grew up in Chicago area, I think?
No, I grew up outside of Baltimore, Maryland.
Okay.
So I lived there obviously until I was 18. I still have a lot of family that's in the Maryland area. My parents live in Annapolis, right next to the Naval Academy. And then shortly when I graduated high school, I went to Miami of Ohio.
Okay.
So that's how I made my way west. And people always ask, how'd you end up in Chicago from Maryland? But I went to Miami of Ohio. I always say, interestingly enough, it was the best school that I got into. So that's where I went. Yep. And then right after graduation, I moved directly from Miami to Chicago. But the funny part about that is that I had never been to Chicago before I moved here. And I didn't have a job when I was moving here. And I remember my dad saying, he said, well, wait a second, you're going to move to the city that you've never been to and you don't have a job in. I said, exactly. That's what I'm going to do. So,
sounds like nothing can go wrong.
Nothing can go wrong. Nothing's going wrong. And the first time I ever saw the city of Chicago, for the people who are familiar, was coming up over the 9094 bridge. And then when you start to go over that crest of the bridge and then you see the city,
Yep.
The first time I saw the city was in a U-Haul truck with my stuff in the back. And then I plopped down and landed right in Wrigleyville, about a block away from the stadium.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah.
Right by the Addison train stop.
Yeah, if you were to tell me, hey, give me 3 guesses, where do you think that I ended up living? I would have guessed Wrigleyville, and Wrigleyville.
Yeah, Wrigleyville. It's like a rite of passage. If you don't live in Wrigleyville for like a hot second, then you're not a real Chicagoan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you come to Chicago, nothing but your belongings with you,
right,
in tow. And what was your major in?
I was a MIS major.
Oh, okay.
I'm terrible at computers.
Okay.
So they told me that you can make the most amount of money with management information systems. So I said, okay, well, I'll do that.
Yep.
But that didn't go well. So I never could code that well.
Okay.
But I got through. But I had a minor in entrepreneurship.
Okay.
So definitely something that was true to my heart.
And so when you moved to Chicago, what was your first job that you did get?
First job I had was I hauled a beer up the rooftop decks outside of Wrigley Field.
Okay.
And so that was, I think I worked for the guy that owned the Cubby Bear. He at that time, before obviously the Ricketts bought all the buildings, owned a couple of the buildings.
Yep.
So I was there to stock and work like the hamburger place and like hauling the beer up from the ground floor up to the top to the bleachers on top of the rooftop buildings.
Wow.
And then I waited tables at a place called Heaven on Seven that used to be right
Yep.
on, Heaven on Seven?
do.
Jimmy Banos used to own that. And right on Clark Street there, I waited tables.
Yeah, that was, I'm trying to think. There's been a couple of different places that have kind of gone through that spot, I feel like.
There's a new one there now.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Oh, that's great. Yeah, the Cajun food, right?
Cajun
kind
food,
of a
yeah.
New Orleans,
Cajun food, that's exactly right.
New Orleans style.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So
So obviously, Holland beer didn't last forever.
no, and more, I didn't really like waiting tables. I never really liked to be serving other people. I always had an issue with it, hence why I'm an entrepreneur. So I wasn't good, nor did I enjoy waiting on other people. So I ended up getting a headhunter job in the dot-com business, but this was right at like the 2001 and 2 when we had the dot-com bubble burst. And I was I worked downtown on like 10 South LaSalle Street. It was dark, those big buildings, there's no light down there. And I had to make like 100 cold calls a day. And I had to wear a suit. And I remember taking the train, and the first couple days, I always thought I was like the coolest person in the whole world, right? You're 22, you got a suit on, I'm going down into the loop. But then I showed up into this dingy office, and it was like boiler room, where my boss would literally hand me a list of numbers, and she would pick up the phone and hand it to me and say, dial. And I did that for about 6 months.
Yeah.
But like after a week or two, it was just a tough business. And because it was in the dot-com area, that era, like every time I'd call someone and try to place a tech specialist, they were saying they were losing their job. It was just really hard.
Yeah.
But I learned some valuable phone skills from that. And I'm definitely not afraid of the telephone because of the fact that I had that 6-month kind of grunt work, just making cold calls.
My first day in the bond business kind of came in from the buy side, right, to the sell side. The gentleman that brought me in, a great friend and was a great mentor to me during that time. The first day he started talking about, he's like, okay, pick up the phone and figure it out. Here's your Bloomberg terminal and just dial. And I'd be like, and I would say, like, who am I calling? He's like, doesn't matter. Just call
somebody.
people. And he, that day and that first week, he would talk to me about like, hey, every day your skin is going to get a little bit thicker and a little bit thicker and a little bit thicker. And sooner or later, it's not like every phone call is going to start being, magical and, yes, we'll buy. Yes, we'll buy. It's not it. You're just more comfortable in that environment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But from a life skill, career skill perspective, nothing wrong with smiling and dialing a little bit.
No, and I think getting over the fear, like when you first pick up that phone, you always think that everybody's in this like corner glass office on the top of a building.
Yep.
But like most of them are in like basement dark rooms, and they're just a common man or woman that's trying to make it. So if you can get your head around that you're just calling someone just like you, it just makes it a lot easier.
Yep. So .com recruiting, not for you.
Not for me.
Okay.
And then so I ended up at a company called C.H. Robinson, which is a Fortune 500 logistics company. Yep. And they're big into recruiting kind of Big Ten graduates. And obviously Miami of Ohio is not in the Big Ten, but kind of still packed in that, the Midwest schools. So they would run classes of 30 like every month or two of, recent graduates, which I still was maybe a year in. So they taught me how to do logistics, and I had a sales background, so it was inside sales. So again, on the phone, and we moved freight from point A to point B. So I would call on manufacturers, whoever that may be, and then offer to move their freight in certain lanes for a price. We obviously made a cut of that price and bought the truck cheaper. And so I worked at C.H. Robinson for about 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah. And
it's amazing in Chicago, and I know just nationally and globally, the number of people that have touched that freight and logistics space. I mean, I have so many friends that have done it
successful
for a period
people too.
of time.
There's some very successful people that have come in and out of like the C.H. Robinson and that logistical background.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, my nephew, my cousin's son, is actually working at C.H.
Right now?
Robinson right now. Yeah. His first job out of University of Dayton.
How long has he been there for?
A couple years.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's some lifers over there, and
Yeah.
that gets a little bit more into my story too, but like some people never leave.
Yeah. Very good.
Yeah.
Very
So-
good. So 5 years moving freight,
Yep.
and then what's the next step?
Well,
on the journey?
this is kind of where the entrepreneur in me kicks off. And,
Yep.
I was 5 years in, and I'll use dates just because that's how I remember it. It was from like 2003 up to 2007. And I did pretty well. And at that time, it was kind of unlimited commission at C.H. Robinson. Like you ate what you kill. And if you did great, you made a ton of money. And I was doing well young. I always say I didn't have a lot of life overhead. I think I owned a 1-bedroom condo in Old Town, right across from the Treasure Island there on Wells Street. Had just met my now wife, Amanda, no kids, no car. And, so I was doing well and having fun. I always had a thing, and this is a crazy thing to say, like I hated going to my boss and asking for a day off. I always thought that if I worked hard, why do I have to ask you if I'm going to take the day off? And it was something just inside me that and I didn't even take a lot of days off. It was more of like a moral issue. Like I shouldn't have to ask you like what I'm doing, especially if we're doing well. And so I just kind of realized early that I'm not built to work for other people.
Yep.
I just am not. Like I'm just built to work for myself. And so funny enough is I actually was in the process of landing a big account out of the East Coast, and I and it was going to double my business. And again, I was 27, so it was going to be good money for me. And they were starting to give me stock options. And I just said, if I get these golden handcuffs, like I'm never going to leave. Like I got to leave now. Now's the time. And so at that time, I was getting my 1-bedroom condo remodeled in Old Town. And the general contractor who was doing it was a friend of one of my friends. And I said, I want to do what you do. And he said, well, why don't you do sales for me? And so I said, okay. And so I left C.H. Robinson in late 2007. I didn't know what I was getting myself into going into real estate and construction in the start of '08.
Right.
Because I found myself in a new industry with a new job right at the beginning of one of the biggest housing crises that this country has seen, in 100 years. And so, but I left and I said, I got to do this. It just felt right.
Yep.
So I went and worked for this small kind of builder developer, and I sold kitchens and baths for him during the '08 through 12 housing crisis.
Wow.
Yeah. And
Wow.
when I left, and this kind of starts the journey of the entrepreneur and my business that it's been now for the past 15 years, but I immediately got licensed as a residential realtor. So I still carry that license today. I'm what's called a managing broker. So I'm legally allowed to run an office. I don't want to practice, but I've done, 20 plus million of transactions over the years of my own stuff or other people's transactions. So I very much understand that side, but I also got licensed as a general contractor.
Got it.
And so both licenses I got in early '08.
Okay.
And so, but I decided to go into the construction space.
Got it. Now, did you have any family background in
No.
construction at all?
Didn't know anything.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Well, that's a big leap. Like I can't, I'm the guy.
But I could sell. So like
Yeah.
that I knew I could do. I could
Right.
sell. I could sell anything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I commend you for it. I'm like one of those guys that I can't fix anything. You give me a math problem, I'll solve it. But you ask me to put, a new roof on something or whatever,
But yeah, I'll let you know a secret. I've been running construction companies for 15 years.
Yep.
I am the least handy human being on the face of the planet. And it's a joke in our household with my wife and I because of the fact that she'll always say, I don't understand how you run a construction company, but you can't hang a picture. So, well, I can't hang a picture, but I know how to run a construction company. So, what's the first rule of business? You understand what you're not good at, and you bring in partners and people around you that are good at those things.
Very good.
I never had to fix or do the work. And I could project manage it and I could sell.
Yep.
And that's what I was good at.
And so I know you said you were working with a friend at that time. Did you eventually you broke off on your own and did your own construction company? Or?
I did, yeah. So from '08 to 12, I sold kitchens and baths,
Yep.
mostly in downtown. I cut my teeth in the downtown high rises doing, remodeling down there. I had always sold to realtors, and that plays into kind of where we are today, which we'll get to. But I always figured that realtors and real estate agents were the people that understood who was buying and selling and moving, and that as long as I made great relationships with those realtors, they would give me the referrals. So I sold into realtors, but yes, from '08 to 12, I worked for that gentleman. And then as we were coming out of the housing crisis in 12, opportunities started to present themselves, and I kind of said, you know what, I've done this now a couple years under your kind of umbrella. Him and I, again, I'm built to be work for myself. Him and I just always thought I could run a company better than him. And I said, it's time for me to go. So I broke off with him in 2012. And then that's when I opened up my first company called MV Construction and Development.
Which has pivoted over the course of time from you doing the development work and construction to sort of leads all the way up to Renovation Sells.
Correct. I mean, yeah. So, I mean, it was something that, I just was doing remodeling under my own umbrella. I bought my first multifamily building in Wicker Park in 2012. That's when you can buy 4-unit buildings for $500 grand. We gutted that, and I lived in one of the units and rented out all the other ones. And then we continued to buy buildings, almost one a year from 2012 up until 2020. We also started flipping houses during that time frame, because from the 2012 up until like the 2020 time frame before COVID was actually good years for real estate investments. Prices were increasing, so we did that. But we also had a remodeling company, and the remodeling company was 4 clients, and we just ended up doing bigger and bigger projects on the rehab side, and we ended up connecting with a big-time designer here in the city, a woman named Rebecca Zaloff from Kitchen Lab, and she brought us in to do a lot of her projects. So she was high design, knew what she was doing, and we were kind of the construction arm for her.
Got it.
So that's where we learned this high-end remodeling, and the high-end design was by doing her high-end projects. So we worked with Rebecca in Kitchen Lab for probably from like 2013 up until about late 2017 doing her high-end client projects.
Got it. Yeah, an interesting run there.
Always evolves.
Yeah, always. Okay, so that leads us up to Renovation
Sells, right?
Which is how we were first introduced by a mutual
Correct.
Friend. And I guess for anybody that's tuning in, listening in, or watching, why don't you just your 2-minute elevator speech on what Renovation Sells is?
Right.
What core problem does it solve, and
Yep.
what are you trying to do with it?
So Renovation Sells does quick cosmetic updates on houses right before they get listed for sale. And the idea is that we always want to take an existing space and give it a high-end makeover, but without reconfiguring it, without doing plans and permits, without doing long lead times. We just want to take the space and do a cosmetic update on it.
Yep.
A lot of times, most of the housing stock, especially in Chicago and around the country, has been built in the last 20 years. The layouts are good layouts. The problem is that the materials that we used when I was building in 07, 08, the travertines, the browns, the granites, those just aren't the materials that the consumer wants today. So, what we decided to do was look, we can still make these houses look really pretty, but we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can just put a nice design on them, change the paint color, change the counters from granite to quartz, change the old light fixture that you bought from Home Depot for $20 and put in a nice, light fixture from Rejuvenation. And we can make it look almost identical to what the big designers were doing with full guts of houses.
Yep.
So that was the thesis. And we kind of got here, just so how we transitioned from MV Construction to Renovation Sells is realtors, while we were doing the projects for the designers, would always come to us and say, hey, can you do these quick updates to the houses to list them? And because I had always sold into realtors, we did them. And we didn't know at the time what we were doing, but when we kind of took a step back in 2017 and we were saying, we got to do something different. Like these high-end projects, they're nice, they look beautiful, but they were really brain damaged, like to get there. Like a year-long project with a high-end client, with plans, permits, inspections, it's brain damage. And we said, where are we making money? Like, what do we like to do? What don't we like to do? And so we kept all the things that we like to do. We liked construction. We liked design. We liked the quick in and out. We did not like some of the clients. We did not like the lead time, the plans, the permits, the inspections. And so we said, well, let's just change the model and get really good at this quick updating construction. And that's how we found our niche, I'm happy to say, is by changing our model.
Yeah, very good. And that when you think about like an average project size, like what is
$35,000.
35,000.
Yeah.
And I think I shared this with you one of the first times we met, but we were one of those families, our first home that we bought. We lived in this kitchen that was just terrible. until we got to the point that we wanted to sell it, and we were just like, oh, well, we should probably, update the countertop
Yeah.
and, redo the walls and paint the cabinets and, just some cosmetic things,
Right.
to your point. And then we got done with it and we're like, oh man, why didn't we do this way earlier? You know what I
It's
mean?
a simple,
And you get to
it's a
enjoy it.
simple process. And
Yeah.
just so we're clear, I mean, we actually do work for the homeowners and we work for people that are moving in as well. Our whole
Okay, got it.
thesis, it started off with just prep for sale, but the whole thesis these days is, renovation sells, but also, as long as it's cosmetic.
Yeah.
We don't want to do these big plans and permanent projects, but if we can touch it and facelift it, we can, that's what we can do.
Yeah.
And
Well, and I think it's such a good niche because, the permitting process, everybody that's ever done a home project, knows what goes along with that. But then, there's also, especially more recently, just because things have been so robust, it's hard to find somebody that's a GC that will do a bathroom project
Yeah.
or a kitchen project,
yeah,
right? And then even when you find them, they don't necessarily have the design expertise.
No.
So you're kind of coming in there and they're saying, well, what do you want to do? Like, and I've
Yeah.
done this at some of my homes in the past, and I'm like, I want you to take this bathroom and make it look nice.
yeah.
And they're like, well, tell me what tile you want. You know what I mean? It's more
Yep.
like they want you to order off the menu. And I'm like, I don't know. That's why you're here. You know what I
That's what
mean?
we
So
do.
like, I guess all I'm saying is being able to sort of like bundle those things in one package, I think is.
Well, the other thing, and look, I think it's natural, and this is something I learned, right? It's natural as you grow as a business owner that you always want to do bigger and better. So our path, when we were with MB Construction, and it was like, let's just do bigger houses, let's do bigger development projects. But what comes with that is you have to have bigger organizations, you have to have bigger systems, bigger processes. And so what we kind of decided to do was like, look, if we played in this space where the average project, and we didn't know what the average project size is, but just say the average project was $30,000. We're really competing against what we call the chuck in the trucks. Like, these guys are not process oriented. They're tradesmen by trade. Maybe they have a helper. They're writing contracts on their scratch paper. They don't have a program.
Yep.
They're not organized. And so if we took our knowledge and processed it, used technology, and really got good at being, doing the cosmetic construction, we just would slowly rise above everybody else. And the other thing is when you're doing these quick turns, it's a high margin business.
Yeah.
When you're in and out, and you're, in and out in 3 weeks, that's our average time. The margins are really good on that. And so we just said, we're going to get, to your point, like we found our niche and said, we're just going to get really good at this niche. We don't care about bigger, but, we care about the volume. The volume is what was more important to us.
Yep. So in terms of how long have you been since you started Renovation Sells?
So Renovation Sells was started in 2018.
18.
So that's when we flipped the model. That's when we came up with the concept of, it was late in 2017 where we said we had to make a change. And I actually happened upon an article in Cranes that was talking about a property management company that was facelifting their rental apartments that ultimately increased the value of the rent. And then when you did a cap rate a calculation on that, it increased the value of the building. And that was like the aha moment. It was like, well, we can do this, but let's just do it on the for sale side.
Yep.
Nobody was doing it. So that's how we created Renovation Sells, and we started Renovation Sells in 2018 in Chicago without any preconceived notion of where it was going to go.
Right. And
It was just to give me a job. Like, I just
you were
needed a new
doing
job.
This was your business,
Without
right?
question, yeah.
Without thinking about growth. And I know we're going to talk about,
Yeah.
the franchise, model and all that kind of stuff too, as it fits in here. But yeah, it's great. And I mean, I know we've talked about a bunch of the sort of salient points for why this, sort of model makes sense. The $30,000, makeover, right? But like, I'm sure you have well-defined, 3 to 5 bullets on, like, hey, this makes sense because of this, that, and the other thing. Like, what's sort of the standard other than, people enjoy the cosmetic, improvement.
Yeah.
Does the house sell faster? Does it sell?
Yeah, I
more?
think, I mean, look, any finished houses sell faster and for more money, period. And a finished, well-designed house always attracts more buyers than an unfinished house. We really live in this HGTV environment, an Instagram environment where everybody the way that things look today is a lot more sophisticated than what they looked in 2007 and 8. And that has to do with the availability of products, the internet, things like that. And so, really the thesis is the first time someone's going to view your house when you're listing it for sale is online. They're going to be with their husband or wife sitting in bed. They're going to be scrolling on their phone. If they stop for a second and decide they don't like their house, you may lose a potential showing. So we always say, don't get swiped, right? Like, give them, the consumer, what they want. So, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to appeal to that first time someone sees the house is, wow, I want to come see that house because the kitchen looks so great. I want to see the house because it looks fresh, new, updated. That's why I want to come see it.
Yep.
Because if you can't drive traffic to your listing, how are you supposed to sell the house? So we want to drive as much traffic to the listing, and that starts on your mobile device online.
Yep.
And then the secondary thing is once you walk into a home that's been finished, it smells new. The fresh paint smell is super important. Like, people use all 5 senses when they're purchasing a home: their eyes, their ears, their sight, their smell. And so, like, you just want to present a clean, pretty product. And what that does is it triggers a buying emotion.
Absolutely.
And that's really what we're in the business of doing.
Yeah. And I mean, I just even thought of, like, I know that there's tech out there that, they could take a room, let's say it's got, 90s style walnut colored, cabinetry and, railings and, things like that, right? I've seen these pictures where they can do, like, before and after, like, see what it could look like, But it's, I mean, even as a consumer, having bought homes that was true of the places that we did, it's one thing to see the picture. It's another thing to walk in the room and feel it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I mean, the fact that it's actually done is a very different thing. And I mean, I know I've heard this anecdotally, but, like, today's buyer doesn't want a home improvement project. They want to. I always heard they want to walk in on Saturday and have their first party on Sunday or whatever.
And a lot of buyers don't have vision. They don't know who they're going to call, who's going to design it, what colors to put on the wall. They just don't, and rightfully so. You're not supposed to if you're not in that world. So we really want to deliver a turnkey product to that buyer.
Yep.
And you can do it by doing cosmetic work to an old house. I mean, that's really what we do.
Yep.
And so, I think today's consumer is so loaded down with, the fast pace of work and their phone, and they're so tied up with, we're so busy because technology makes us be busy, that they don't have time. And now this is a blanket statement. Some people like the remodeling process. So I'm not saying everybody hates it. Some people do. But I'd say most consumers would rather, even me, I'm a builder. In my next house, I don't want to build my own house. I want to buy a turnkey house that's done, because it's too much energy and effort to build a custom home.
Yep. We hit on the franchise model a little bit.
Yeah.
But okay, so walk me through. Obviously, you have this idea.
Yeah.
You are experimenting with it within your own business.
Right.
At some point in time, I think you're having a conversation of, wow, I've got this little pink umbrella idea.
Yep.
How do I either grow it organically or take it to the masses? Or you go through this iteration of, like, what's the best way to do this? Like, what were the triggers that made you start thinking big?
Yep.
And then among the big ideas, what were sort of the lanes of how do we get there?
I mean, it was, in year one, we started off and, we did a decent business, right? A couple $100,000 a year one. And then in year two, we exploded. Like, we did just under $2 million in sales, like within 1 year of starting this business. And it was like, this will work anywhere. Realtors, it's like when you tell people what we do, like, you can see their eyes get big and they go, oh my God, that's such a great idea. Like, how can I use that? Like, or how can I work with you guys? And we kind of realized that, wow, it didn't just work in Chicago. We thought it would work all over.
Yep.
And there happened to be a company, there's only a couple competitors in this space, but there happened to be the first national player came to town in September of 19. And so we understood at that point that there was competition, and we understood that there was another group that was starting to expand on a national basis. And we kind of said, we didn't like that particular competitor's product. We realized that they didn't actually come from the design and construction space. They were a bunch of VC guys that came into the space and were trying to create the solution to a problem, but they didn't really understand what the problem was. Whereas we were actually builders and developers that had an intimate knowledge of what the issues were and how to solve those issues. And we said, well, we can do this. This will work anywhere. And we can do this on a national basis. How do we expand?
Yep.
Right. So the first thought, the immediate thought was, well, we'll oversee a multi-state construction operation with project managers.
Yep.
But that quickly, and that's what our competitor does, but that's a quickly we realized, because we're from the space, that's a flawed model. How can you control an $80,000 a year project manager across state lines?
Yep.
You can't. You're always going to get $80,000 a year service.
Yeah.
So then the secondary option, and my wife Amanda, I give her full credit for this. She said, I think we should franchise the business. And now, usually I'm the idea guy, right? Like I'm the one that has like all these ideas that flow from me. But it was her idea that said we should franchise the business. And I remember it vividly. It was around Thanksgiving of 2019. And she said, let's franchise. And I said, give me a piece of paper. And so I said, okay, so if we do X times number of locations times a royalty times this, I said, and then I did the quick calculation and I was like, yep, that's what we're going to do. We're going to franchise this business. And it took like a half hour. Yeah. And I was like, done, we're doing it. And she was immediately then on the phone or the computer sending emails to people in the franchise space, literally that day. So like we decided how to scale, we picked franchising, and we were emailing people within the matter of like a day. And that was in November of 19, and we incorporated and started down the franchise path in 2020 of January.
And the groups that you work with, did they coach you? Because I know that
right.
one of the biggest things is figuring out what's the playbook, what's the secret sauce, right?
Yeah.
Did they coach you on all that, or did you guys do that on your own?
We hired a consultant
okay.
Out of Pennsylvania. The consultant got us in touch with our attorney who specializes in franchise law. And then we created our FDDs, which are called our federal disclosure documents, and then a manual and all the stuff that you have to get prepared to sell your business.
Yeah.
And that took about 18 months. That was, I mean, we still operated our Chicago location, which we still own and operate today, which is our corporate operation. But we spent from January of 2020 up until we sold our first franchise in September of 21. I mean, that was 18, 19, 20 months that we spent without knowing if we could even sell our business.
Yeah. Well, not to mention,
and we spent a whole bunch of money.
Not to mention, you're in the eye of COVID. I mean, like I'm having flashbacks right now. We had a friend of mine, Heather Ruff, on that was one of the founders of Spenga.
Yeah,
if you're familiar with their workout facilities, but they were like, from a timing perspective, they had actually, I think, started just before COVID,
right,
and then had to sort of power through it. But you were sort of right in the midst of it then, and I'm sure you're sitting around thinking to yourself like, oh my gosh, is this, Well,
we were building. I mean, we were still building. So like the beauty part about a franchise is all franchises, at least most of them, are born from a corporate operation.
Yep.
So our corporate operation at that time in 2020 was coming into its third year. I'd always sold into realtors. So realtors were, still giving us business. Obviously what we didn't predict were shutdowns. It was such a roller coaster in 20, and then, scrapping for the the PPP and the EIDL money and all that stuff. And then, can you work? Can you not work? And then, you came out of it and rates just dropped and the housing market went crazy and then inflation happened, so like it was just a wild ride that we were on with the corporate side while we were building out the whole infrastructure to get ready, and not even the infrastructure, really while we were building out all the materials to get ready to sell our business.
Yep.
Because franchising is really, we're just selling our house or our business over and over and over again, and you have to get it already packaged to be ready to sell to somebody else.
Yeah. And I mean, that whole like just instinct of like go, go, go.
Yeah.
I mean, I know we're going to talk a little bit about like just grit and getting through stuff and like the fortitude that you need to have as an entrepreneur to, persevere and whatever. But like, even today, interest rates are high and whatever. And it's like, look, we're plowing forward because this idea, like you're saying, like you've touched this much of the potential opportunity. I think you've shared the math with me before about like just the order of magnitude of projects that fit the description of the type
No,
of...
there's, I mean, in this market, there's probably, in any given year, on average, 4 million homes that
Yep.
get listed for sale.
Yep.
There's 4 or 5 companies, and we're the biggest by location on a national basis that does pre-sale renovation. Collectively, do 10,000 units a year right now.
Yep.
10,000 over 4 million. It's like 0.00001%.
Right.
Like, we're not even scratching the surface. I have in my mind, I have a vision of like 5 fishing boats in an ocean, and it's just us fishing. Like, it just doesn't matter.
Yes.
Like, it's an unlimited untapped potential of housing that can be touched.
Yep.
From our model. It will be endless forever.
Yep. And so, sorry, I skipped back a little bit there, but you come up with the model, you're working on all the playbook stuff.
Yeah.
At what point in time do you start sort of actually selling franchises?
Well, we got our whole business legally ready to sell, which is its first challenge. Like, how do you get legally ready to sell? And you have to register with the Federal Trade Commission. You have to register what's called your FDD, your Federal Disclosure Documents, which is essentially a business plan, including financials, so they understand, are you a viable business? And so we did that, and then you have to get it ready to sell. So, like, that's its own thing. Okay, now I'm legal to sell, but I have no marketing.
Yeah.
So then we spent 8 months. We created videos. We created drip campaigns. We actually signed on a third-party company that specializes in selling franchise businesses like ours. And there's a whole subset of people in the franchise world of how it works. But they really shepherd us through the process. And we spent about 8 months and tons of money creating the forward-facing marketing and materials that we could put out into the market and then present to different people who were looking to buy franchises, right? And because, look, we're in the business of selling dreams. So the marketing was really important to be able to put forth in a good way so we could get people interested.
Yep.
So we started that process in like September of 20. And then, we were finished and ready to sell by like May or June of 21.
Okay.
And so we went to market, and then no one bought us all summer. And then that's where the doubt starts to come in, because you're like, I just spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to get to a point where, okay, now my business, but who's going to buy us, right? And so this is part of being an entrepreneur, is this roller coaster ride of emotion, of trying to understand and being able to fight through, the mental up and down.
Oh,
you understand.
I'm familiar with this.
The mental up and down of running a business. But then we started to get some traction in September of 21, and we didn't sell one, we sold 4 in September. And so we had our first 4 locations, and it wasn't we had Naperville, Dallas, Texas, Denver, Colorado, and Charlotte, North Carolina. We literally had a subset of the whole country. Was our first 4.
Yeah.
And so I remember vividly when I was sitting outside my house and we sold our first one, and I was like, okay, we can do this. If we can sell it in another state and someone's willing to buy it, then it's sellable all over the country.
Yep.
But up until that point, I mean, we rolled for 19 or 20 months, and there was major doubt. Is someone going to buy our business?
I don't know. In my mind, there's always a pool of people that are interested in a franchise,
without question,
business, right? And it's a way to become an entrepreneur for yourself.
Spot on.
Right? Without having your little pink umbrella idea of your own, right? Yep. And like, just when I think about it, like, if I were to line up, say, a fast casual restaurant franchise concept or something like that, right? With this idea, this one may feel like on paper a little bit more reliable, but even then I hear of stories of it's a game of numbers.
Yeah.
Right? They know that if they can saturate a market, right, 75% of them are, I'm making this up. 80% of them, whatever the number is going to work, and we know that 20% aren't going to work, but the goods are going to outweigh the bad. It's just like a numbers game. But like, when I think about that relative to this, I mean, the numbers that you're talking about with the 10,000 homes relative to the 4 million that are sold, and we're not even talking that those are houses sold.
Yeah.
Let alone somebody that
buys and moves in, or someone that stays in their house.
Yeah, somebody that stays in their house is like an enormous opportunity.
Without question.
So, like, for those people, what do you think? Like, let's say hypothetically somebody were to watch this and catch this podcast, right? Like, for that person, in order for that person to be successful as a franchisee in your business,
Yeah.
what are some of those key attributes?
Right.
Like I know what would come to my mind, but like I'm curious what yours.
Yeah, our business, I mean, sales and networking.
Yeah.
Those who does networking the best, because we're selling to realtors. And let me just back up a second. I mean, we determined that realtors were the best people to sell to because the top 500 realtors in any given market control 90% of the market.
Yeah.
Why market to 1 million household population, let's just say the city of Chicago, to try to get the consumer when you can market to 500 people that will bring you in on the project?
Yeah.
That being said, I say that because we're marketing specifically to realtors. Realtors are finicky in terms of like who they bring in and decide to partner with. So you have to be really good at networking with and selling to realtors and getting them to trust you.
Yep.
However, I think this is where the franchise model shines, is because the franchise model is an ownership model. Every franchisee and partner that's in our system owns their own location. They're local. And I think, let's just say Austin, Texas, Jeremiah, who's down there, my guy, he grew up in Austin, knows that market, knows people around. So he's a local expert and knows the realtors in that town, right? So that is the reason why the sales and networking is most important, is that you really have to be able to get to those realtors and get them to trust you. But they trust you because you're local and you're from the space.
I would imagine that that's got to be, in terms of your own diligence, one of the boxes that
Well,
you
without
check.
question. I mean, we've got, I just use it 40 mics. Like I have 45 mics. And they're men, women. I'm not saying, mic men. I'm just saying that we have 45 people that own their location, that care deeply about their reputation. They care deeply about their product. They care deeply about their community. And
Yep.
people buy local. They want to buy local.
Yep.
So franchising sets up very well for what we're doing because of the localized aspect of the whole thing.
So you mentioned, was it 45? 45 franchises.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
And that is from the original 4. So I know we talked about, the opportunity set is gigantic.
Gigantic.
But what is sort of the, if you want to eat an elephant, you got to do it one bite at a time kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Can't just take it all down?
Yeah. I mean,
Why not?
you can't probably start 1,000 franchises next month.
No.
But in your mind, what's sort of like, here is 45, there is what number?
Yeah, I mean,
And like, what's a realistic?
There was different, right? Like, just to give you, like, the first one was I just need to sell 1, right?
Yep.
So then we sold 1 and was like, okay, if we can get to 10, we've kind of gone past, we're in the top 20% of franchise units if you get past 10.
Yep.
And then the next number that we're vying for that we think we're going to hit by the end of the year was 50. Like, that was the next benchmark. But then the benchmark after 50 is 100. 100's like the golden number in franchising. If you get to 100 franchisees or 100 franchise units, you're in the top 3% of franchise operations in the US. And so we're on our way by 2026 to be at 100 plus locations all over the country.
Outstanding. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Out of curiosity, you're you're a serial entrepreneur, and I think that there's so much of what you're talking about with like the common thread. Like if you just have it in you that you're just like, yeah, but I could do this better,
Yeah.
or just, not that you're a bad person or whatever, but like you got this bug, you know what I mean? That you're like, for me, it was always, I wanted a new challenge,
Right.
right? I would do something, I'd get it down,
Yeah.
and then I'd be like, okay, next.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, well, you're moving a little bit too fast. And I'd be like,
Yeah.
no, I'm moving at a good pace.
It's always faster.
but
Entrepreneurs move faster than other
I
people
just
do.
wanted to, I
Yeah.
wanted always new challenges.
Right.
And it's part of the reason why I love what I do now is because, we're growing a growing organization ourselves, but we're also working with a bunch of different types of organizations.
Yeah.
And so like that continuous loop of like, oh, I've never seen that before.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, I've seen that before.
Yeah.
And this is the play for that,
Yeah.
I don't know, it's just kind of interesting. But out of your entrepreneurial journey, what have sort of been, 1 to 3 of your best decisions and 1 to 3 of your things that you're like, hey, I made a mistake there, but I learned from it and I won't make that mistake again.
Yeah, I mean, the best decision we ever made was, my first best decision was to go into business for myself. Like that's without question, right? Like, and you can't learn entrepreneurship in a book, despite what maybe some people can. In my opinion, I've learned from the School of Hard Knocks in terms of you got to get out and do it.
Yep.
Right. So like making, if when I talk to entrepreneurs, there's so many, and I use this stat, and I'm going to use a rough number, but I like the stat. It's like 80% of people in the US wish they were entrepreneurs, but only 15% are.
Yeah.
And what that tells me is that there's tons of people that think about it, but they don't know how to get off the seat to go from employment, under someone else's umbrella to running their own ship.
Yep.
And sometimes for me, the best decisions that I always make, they're quick, they don't require much thought. And not that they're, malicious in any capacity, but like you make the decision and you move.
Yep.
Make a decision and move. We're going to franchise, I'm franchising. And so like those are decisions that I've always made, so making the decision to be an entrepreneur
Yep.
is some of the best things that I've ever done. I think the other thing that I attribute to my limited success is that I ask for help. Like I am not shy. If someone's giving me their number or if someone's telling me they'll help me, like I am calling that person and I'm asking them to help me. And I'm asking them for my ideas. Being an entrepreneur is lonely.
Yep.
You understand that? Being an entrepreneur, when you run your own ship and you don't have a door to knock on, sometimes it can feel very alone. And you can make decisions because you're uninformed.
Yep.
And so being able to surround yourself with groups of people that are willing to help, and I think the entrepreneur community in general is very willing to help people below them because they all understand what it's like to be in their shoes.
Yep.
So asking for help is something that I've always done. And then the third thing that I've always done is I've really never had a huge ego around what I know. And I've always realized that there's always people out there that do it better than me. And so then I'll just lean on the people that do it better than me to support my operation. And so those are the things that I've attributed to my success. Now, on the failure side, I probably made every mistake in the book.
Yeah.
I didn't file my taxes correctly and got dung on the backside. I didn't realize the difference between markup and margin and didn't understand why my business wasn't making any money. We weren't using programs to run the operation and we were writing contracts and then never understanding why there was no money in the account. And there's just so many instances that I've made mistakes along the way, but I'm a learner by doing.
Yep.
And then once I do it and then I make that mistake, I'm most likely not going to make that mistake again, but I'm not afraid of failure. And so failure doesn't necessarily, it's like not on my radar. And to me, failure is not an option, but I don't like, even if I make a mistake, that's not failure. That's just a learning experience.
Yep.
Right. So, I mean, I could give you 1,000 mistakes I've made.
Yeah.
But mistake is good, though. When you're an entrepreneur, it's a good thing to make mistakes because that's how you learn.
Yep. Well, you've really hit on, two major things that I think about when, like, what does it require, to be an entrepreneur? What is it? I think selling and networking.
Yeah.
The ability to get out there, tell your story, have people that are willing to listen, have people that want to support you, all that kind of stuff. But just like the perseverance, like you said, failing is not an option.
Not an option.
You might hit a roadblock, but that roadblock isn't going to put you down. You know what I mean? You're going to plow through it. You're going to reinvent. You're going to on to the next one. You know what I mean? And so like those two things are critically important. And I think there are a lot of would-be entrepreneurs. And I've talked about this in some of our other episodes, but like one of those biggest hurdles is like that I'm not going to fail kind of thing.
Yeah.
So they have so much to lose leaving comfort and the security and their best interest of their family and security and all that kind of stuff, that like leaving that sense of security behind to go do their thing is just too big of a obstacle.
And that's real. I mean, those are real pressures, right? Like leaving a paycheck, leaving benefits, leaving security, leaving is a real challenge. And there's real pressures when you leave, especially the older you are, the more overhead you have. That's why earlier in the, I said, I kind of realized now was the time because my life overhead was really small. Like I had a 1-bedroom, $2,000 a month condo I owned. Like that was it. Like there was nothing else. So like now was the time.
Yep.
But I think that's what sets up well for franchising because, something that we didn't talk about, there's founders and there's entrepreneurs.
Yep.
And there's a difference, right? Not everybody is meant to be a founder and create.
Yep.
My skill set is creation, vision, and quick decisions and movement. But some people very much want to be entrepreneurs, but don't have the creative vision and understand how to run a business. So franchising sets up really well is because we're essentially giving people the keys to a car. I always say, I'm going to give you the keys to my car. You can determine if you drive it like a station wagon or a Ferrari. That's up to you, right? But I will give you the keys. So they get to go past 5 years of my brain damage.
Yep.
They can buy into the business and they have a business in a box. They still have to be entrepreneurs to run it,
Right.
but they're not necessarily the founder who created it.
Yeah.
And not everybody is a founder.
That's a good distinction. I like that.
Yeah.
Very good. So we were kind of hitting on that. The third point I wanted to hit on, just kind of thematically is, when you break down, sort of the success chart of, and to your point, you're not taking like, oh, I've taken over the world now and all that kind of stuff as an entrepreneur. But if you were to break down a pie chart of like grit versus network versus timing, good luck, whatever it might be. Now I'm really sounding like Guy Raz. I know. We were talking about before we started here how I built this. Shout out,
Yeah.
Guy Raz. You've been an inspiration to both of us.
Thank you, Guy Raz.
But I am curious, like, because I think you're a lot like me and your extroversion and things like that. And I value my relationships like
Sure.
incredibly.
Yeah.
I'm curious in your like.
I mean, it's to me, it's like 75% grit and determination. Like and the rest of it fills in the networking and the skill set. But like, if you don't have like the amount of hurdles that entrepreneurs and people have to get through, it's unimaginable in some respect. And I'm a member of Vistage. You and I have talked about this, which is a CEO organization. But on their cover of their journal that they send out, it's a mountain. It's literally like climbing a gigantic mountain to start and found and scale a business. But the amount of hurdles that you have to get through from day one. What name are we going to do? Who are we going to call? Who's going to create our website? Like, you have to be able to get through every single hurdle. And, so grit and determination is something that I very much hold dear to my heart. And it's something that, like, even now it's, I don't like the word no. I don't like when people tell me no. And it's more or less like, if you're going to tell me no, just put someone on the phone that's going to tell me yes. Like, okay, well, who's the next person in line? Because
I'm going to try that.
I'm not interested in your no. Like, okay, I'm glad you said no. Put the next person on the phone. I'm going to get them to say yes. But that's grit and determination. And that's in anything. That's in insurance, accounting, finance, building, construction, the permit process. It doesn't matter. I'm getting a yes.
Yeah.
So 75% grit and determination. The rest of it is those soft skills.
Yeah, I always go back to this, and I don't know if you would ever watch this, but a really good friend of mine went out onto his own years ago in his own business, and his in-laws were entrepreneurs, very successful entrepreneurs. And I remember he told me that his father-in-law sat him down when he was getting ready to branch off and go on his own. And he said, hey, I'm just going to tell you this right now. It's like, one day in the not too distant future, you're going to wake up and go like this.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God, yes.
And he's like, the sooner you know that moment is coming and it won't be the last one,
the
more likely you are to be successful as an entrepreneur. And I always just remember him telling me that, because like there's times when I've faced adversity or I've seen our clients face adversity or whatever, and it's just like, you're gonna get through.
John, I can remember spending the early days for like years with my hands like this.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, like how are we gonna do this?
Yeah.
Like, but you got to wake up like weeks and months of just living in uncomfortableness.
Yep.
And for extended periods of time. And so now I'm going to give my mental health plug here. But like one thing that I've really leaned on is, maybe not a lot of people know, is I meditate every single day.
Yeah.
And so, I've really gotten in a good headspace to, how do I tackle the problem of the day? I wake up, I tackle that problem, I execute, and then I look at tomorrow. Yeah. But if you look, and this is a skill, this is a learned skill. It's not something that people are taught. It has to be learned. But, the mental health aspect to me of entrepreneurship is super important. I think that entrepreneurs go through a mental mind conundrum that people don't understand, and that you really have to be able to take this day by day, tackle the problem of the day, and not get too overwhelmed by the whole thing. You know, if I looked at where we want to go and what we want to do and all the things we had to accomplish, it's super overwhelming. But because I'm able to focus on my day, I can accomplish what I need to do today. And it's always just keep moving the ball forward little by little, just move it forward, move it forward, move it forward. And that's how I approach what we do. And today I'm as happy as I've ever been, even though we're scaling a big company and there's still lots of stresses, but you know, the stresses are external. I try to keep it together on a day-to-day basis.
And I'm sure you wouldn't have it any other way.
No.
Love it.
No.
Awesome. Well, with the podcast and that was as enriching as I thought it would be. And people are going to get a real treat when they tune in for this one. But I do have, at the end of our conversation, always 3 questions that I ask. I switched it up.
All right.
This time, just so you know.
Okay.
Season 2. Season 1's in the past.
Okay.
Season 2 is here. So first question is this. Your top 3 rock and roll bands of all time.
Okay.
And you can explore the space here. You can, however you want to interpret that.
I'm going to interpret it the way I want to interpret it, because that's the way I do things, the way I want to do it.
All right.
My first would be Rage Against the Machine.
All right.
I think Tom Morello is a fabulous guitarist, and and these are all bands that I obviously grew up on. So
local product as well.
Tom Morello is from Illinois. Yeah. That's right. So Rage Against the Machine, phenomenal. They have put on one of the best live concerts, if you've ever seen a rock concert, that you're ever going to see in your life. The energy is crazy. The second one would be Pearl Jam. I think that's a little bit cliche, but I am a child of the 80s and 90s. So that was, good rock music. And I've, again, put on a live performance. And then I'm going to go a little bit off the rock and roll train, and I'm going to say Dr. Dre. But it more has to do with his influence on music in general, from him, the creation of NWA into, Dr. Dre as a solo artist, and then the mentoring of all the other artists like Snoop Dogg and Eminem and 50 Cent, and then partnering with Jimmy Ivy and creating Beats and Apple. I just think his touch and his breath on music has been extensive. So I think he's one of the greatest artists of our generation.
Yeah, no doubt. Love Pearl Jam. Well, love Dre. I don't want to skip over that because, we talked about the Defiant Ones a little bit, right?
Earlier.
Just such an incredible documentary about, that whole storyline of him and Jimmy Iovine coming from 2 different places, but then meeting in one place to...
And entrepreneurs, right? And all entrepreneurs. I mean, those guys are very much entrepreneurs.
That fortitude, that ability to just say, we're going to figure this out.
Yeah, without question.
Just amazing. And I love how they do, they've got the school now at USC.
They do. I knew that. Yep.
The Young Ivy Center for Innovation or whatever it's called. All right. Question number 2. Which annual holiday is the best one? Now, this is a loaded question. People...
4th of July.
I
love 4th of July. Right. I'm a summer birthday. I'm an August birthday, so I enjoy the summer the most. A good barbecue with fireworks, outdoor at the pool, golf, whatever else. 4th of July is my favorite holiday, hands down. With Thanksgiving being a close second.
Okay. All right. That's a good one. What's number 2?
Thanksgiving.
Because it's funny, when I was writing that question, I was thinking to myself, like, everybody's going to either say Thanksgiving or Christmas. And then I'm like, well, actually, there's some people that really love Halloween. And then I started thinking about it. I'm like, I think the 4th of July might be my favorite.
Is that your favorite? Just it's always warm. It's always, I don't know, it's just good people, barbecues, it's parades.
Well, Glen Ellen is kind of an epicenter for, it's like, if you live here, generally speaking, you don't leave here because it's such a big production here. Yep. Like lake houses and stuff like that. People typically would, go after the 4th of July, but I do love it. All right. If you weren't doing what you were doing currently for work, what is a completely unrelated career that you can see yourself thriving in?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fortunate that I found my career. I would definitely, real estate, construction, development is where I'm supposed to be. I always thought that I would love to be a music producer. I like music so much.
Yep.
If somehow I could be in the music production space, I think I'd be good at that. And on the flip side of that, it's if it wasn't real estate, I'd a stockbroker, whatever that. But that was more the traditional stockbroker before the technology has wiped out all the stockbrokers. But something in markets.
Yeah.
I would enjoy that side of things. The fast-pacedness, the numbers, the big numbers. I like that. I like that type of stuff.
You like the chase.
I like the chase.
The thrill of the hunt.
I like the thrill.
Yeah.
Correct.
Very good. Well, Michael, thank you for being here. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah.
That's very valuable. And like I said, I hope that someday, this forum can be a means towards helping you and doing what you're doing. And I know that you're going to do somebody a favor when they tune in
No
and
question.
listen to what you have to say. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet.
All right.